Hello and welcome back to our channel. Tonight, we delve into a story that sent shockwaves through the glittering world of beauty pageants and exposed a darkness lurking beneath the glamour. A story of ambition, betrayal, and a love that was tragically cut short. Before we begin, if you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of our upcoming tales. Now, prepare yourselves for the heartbreaking and chilling account of the pregnant beauty queen slain, the cruel truth of the chairwoman's crime. The world knew her as Isabella Reyes, the reigning Miss Global Charity, a title she had won not just with her breathtaking beauty, but with a palpable aura of kindness that seemed to radiate from her very being. Her smile, a dazzling crescent of pearly whites, could light up a room, and her eyes, the color of warm honey, held a depth that hinted at a soul far older than her 24 years. To the public, she was an angel, a beacon of hope, and the embodiment of grace. Her every move was chronicled by the press, her every gown praised, her every charity appearance a resounding success. She was living a life that most could only dream of, a fairy tale spun from silk and starlight. But as with all fairy tales, a darker, more sinister narrative was being woven in the shadows, a narrative that would soon unravel in the most brutal and public way imaginable. The architect of this fairy tale, the puppet master pulling the strings of Isabella's gilded cage, was Madame Serafina Dubois, the formidable chairwoman of the Miss Global Charity organization. Serafina was a woman carved from ice and ambition. Her silver hair was always coiffed in an impeccable chignon. Her designer suits were armor, and her gaze could make even the most seasoned politicians wither. She had built the pageant from a provincial contest into a global phenomenon, and she guarded its reputation with a ferocious, almost obsessive, zeal. To the world, she was Isabella's mentor, a guiding hand leading her protégé to greatness. She would often be quoted in magazines, her voice a smooth, cultured purr, speaking of Isabella's immense potential and unwavering dedication. In front of the cameras, she would place a perfectly manicured hand on Isabella's shoulder, a gesture that looked like affection but felt like a brand. The truth of their relationship was far more complex and suffocating. Behind the closed doors of Serafina's opulent office, a room that overlooked the city like a predatory eagle's nest, the warmth in her voice would evaporate, replaced by a chillingly precise critique of Isabella's every move. A pound gained was a disgraceful lapse in discipline. A slightly less enthusiastic wave to a crowd was a failure to engage. A moment of genuine, unscripted laughter was unbecoming of a queen. Serafina controlled Isabella's diet, her schedule, her friendships, and her public persona. She had molded Isabella into the perfect symbol of her organization, and she would not tolerate a single crack in the flawless facade. For a long time, Isabella had accepted this as the price of her dream. She had grown up in a small, forgotten town with nothing but a library card and a fierce determination to escape. The pageant had been her golden ticket, and she was grateful, at first, for Serafina's guidance. She had willingly bent to the older woman's will, eager to please, desperate to prove herself worthy of the crown. But the weight of the crown was heavier than she had ever imagined, and the constant scrutiny was a slow-acting poison, seeping into her soul and dimming the vibrant light that had once shone so brightly within her. The only true source of light in her increasingly shadowed world was Liam. He was an investigative journalist, a man with a rumpled charm and a passion for uncovering the truths that powerful people tried to bury. They had met at a charity gala, a brief, stolen conversation in a quiet corner of a crowded ballroom. He had seen past the glittering gown and the practiced smile, and had spoken to the woman beneath, the woman who loved old books and rainy afternoons and the taste of a perfectly ripe strawberry. Their connection was immediate and profound, a silent recognition of two souls who had found their counterpart. Their love affair was a secret, a fragile bubble of happiness in a world that would have torn it apart. They met in clandestine locations, dimly lit cafes on the outskirts of the city, secluded park benches shrouded in the mists of early morning, and the cozy anonymity of Liam's small, book-cluttered apartment. It was in these stolen moments that Isabella could finally breathe, could shed the heavy mantle of Miss Global Charity and simply be herself. With Liam, she could laugh without restraint, her voice a cascade of joyous sound that had long been silenced. She could speak of her fears, her dreams, and the suffocating grip of Serafina's control. Liam listened, his heart aching for the woman he loved, and he vowed to find a way to free her from her gilded cage. Liam was working on a story, a deep dive into a web of financial corruption that seemed to lead back to a number of powerful figures in the city. He had a source, an anonymous whistleblower who was feeding him documents and information. He didn't know it yet, but the threads of his investigation were leading him closer to Serafina Dubois than he could ever have imagined. The turning point came on a cool autumn evening. Isabella, her face pale but her eyes shining with a fierce, protective light, told Liam that she was pregnant. A wave of joy, so pure and overwhelming, washed over him, followed by a cold dread. He knew what this meant. A pregnant beauty queen was a scandal that Serafina would never tolerate. It was a crack in the flawless facade, a blemish on the perfect image she had so carefully crafted. Isabella, however, was resolute. The tiny life growing inside her had given her a strength she never knew she possessed. She was no longer willing to be a pawn in Serafina's game. She told Liam about a ledger she had found in Serafina's private study, a black book filled with names, dates, and figures that seemed to corroborate the information from Liam's source. She had made a copy, a digital file that she had hidden away. This was their escape plan, their leverage. With this evidence, they could expose Serafina and finally be free to build a life together, a life for their child. But Serafina was always one step ahead. Her network of spies was vast, her intuition as sharp as a shard of glass. She had noticed the subtle changes in Isabella, the newfound defiance in her eyes, the secret smiles that played on her lips when she thought no one was watching. She had her followed, and it didn't take long for her to discover the secret trysts with the journalist. The news of the pregnancy, delivered by a paid informant, was the final unforgivable betrayal. In Serafina's twisted mind, this was not just an inconvenience. It was a declaration of war. Isabella was not just her protégée. She was a possession, a reflection of her own perfection. And now that possession was tarnished, threatening to bring down the empire she had spent a lifetime building. The love she had once professed for Isabella curdled into a cold, venomous rage. A plan began to form in the dark recesses of her mind, a plan as meticulous and cruel as the woman herself. The end came on a Tuesday night. Isabella was alone in her luxurious penthouse apartment, a perk of her reign, a place that had always felt more like a beautifully decorated prison than a home. She had just spoken to Liam on the phone, their conversation filled with whispered promises of their future. She was looking at a sonogram picture, a grainy black and white image of the tiny life that represented all of her hopes and dreams. A soft knock on the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, she was surprised to see one of Serafina's personal assistants, a young, nervous-looking woman named Chloe. She opened the door, a question on her lips. The next few moments were a blur of motion and a sharp, blinding pain. The apartment, usually a pristine monument to minimalist elegance, was transformed into a scene of brutal, chaotic violence. Furniture was overturned, expensive vases shattered, and the cream-colored carpet was stained with a horrifying crimson. The next morning, the cleaning staff, arriving at their usual time, were greeted by a scene of unimaginable horror. Isabella Reyes, the angel of the city, the beloved Miss Global Charity, lay lifeless on the floor, her sightless eyes staring up at the crystal chandelier. The fairy tale was over, and a nightmare had just begun. The gilded cage had become a tomb, and the world was about to learn the cruel and bloody price of a dream. Detective Miles Corbin arrived at the crime scene just as the city was beginning to wake up, its usual morning symphony of car horns and sirens momentarily muted by the gravity of the news that was spreading like wildfire. Corbin was a man who seemed to be perpetually at odds with the world. His suit was always a little rumpled. His tie was always slightly askew, and a cynical, world-weary expression was etched onto his face as if it had been carved there by years of witnessing the very worst of humanity. He was a good detective, a brilliant one even, but the job had taken its toll, leaving him with a deep-seated distrust of appearances and a belief that everyone, no matter how perfect they seemed, had a secret to hide. The penthouse apartment was a maelstrom of controlled chaos. Forensics teams in white suits moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency, dusting for prints, collecting fibers, and documenting every detail of the horrific scene. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the cloying sweetness of the wilting roses that stood in a shattered vase on the floor. Corbin surveyed the scene, his eyes missing nothing.
The overturned furniture, the scattered jewelry, the open safe, it was all a little too perfect, a little too much like a scene from a B-movie. It's a crime, robbery gone wrong, but Corbin's instinct, honed over 2 decades of walking through the aftermath of violence, was screaming something else entirely. They were screaming, say, hair never beside Isabella's body, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second. She looked so young, so fragile in death. Hair noted the defensive wound on her arm, the sign of a struggle, but also the brutal efficiency of the fatal blow. She was not a panic junkie looking for a quick score. She was personal. She was Rick, the medical examiner, a grim-faced woman named Dr. Anya Sama, confirmed his suspicion. She was pregnant, she said, her voice.
About 10 weeks. The words hung in the air, adding another layer of tragedy to the already devastating scene. The investigation began with the usual procession of interviews, a parade of tearful assistants, shell-shocked pageant officials, and rival beauty queens who offered condolences that dripped with insincerity. They all spoke of Isabella in glowing terms, painting a picture of a flawless, universally adored young woman. But Corbin knew that perfection was a myth. He was looking for the cracks, the resentments, the jealousies that festered beneath the surface of this glittering world. He found the first major crack in the facade when a grief-stricken, almost incoherent Liam burst into the police station. His eyes were red-rimmed, his clothes were disheveled, and he clutched a photograph of a smiling Isabella as if it were a life raft in a sea of despair. He told Corbin everything. Their secret love affair, the pregnancy, their plans to escape, and his deep-seated fear of Serafina Dubois. He spoke of Serafina's controlling nature, her obsession with Isabella, and the almost palpable sense of ownership she had over the young woman. Liam's story, as wild as it sounded, resonated with Corbin's own suspicions. It provided a motive that was far more compelling than a simple robbery. He began to dig into the world of Serafina Dubois and the Miss Global charity organization, and what he found was a cesspool of corruption and deceit hidden beneath a veneer of philanthropy and glamour. He started with the organization's finances. On the surface, they were immaculate, a testament to Serafina's business acumen. But with the help of a forensic accountant, Corbin began to uncover a complex web of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and laundered money.
It seemed that the charity in Miss Global charity was more of a suggestion than a reality. Millions of dollars were being siphoned off, funneled into Serafina's personal account and YouTube Bright official, silent critic, and maintained her iron grip on the city elite. Then came the interview with former present contestant, young women who had long since left the spotlight. Many were reluctant to talk, they feared Serafina still a potent force year later. But Corbin, with his very persistent, managed to break through the wall of silence. They spoke of a culture of fear and intimidation, of public ruin and humiliating critique. They spoke of contracts that were little more than indentured servitude, and of the immense pressure to maintain an impossible standard of.
One former winner, her voice trembling, told him about the Black Book, a ledger that Serafina kept, filled with the secrets and indiscretions of powerful people, a tool of blackmail that she used to maintain her influence. Liam, driven by a desperate need for justice, became Corbin's unofficial partner. He used his journalistic skills to dig deeper, to connect the dots that Corbin was uncovering. He remembered Isabella mentioning the ledger, the digital copy she had made. They tore through her apartment, her personal belongings, her laptop, searching for the file. They found it on a small, encrypted USB drive, hidden in the false bottom of a jewelry box. The file was a bombshell. It contained scanned pages of the ledger, a meticulous record of Serafina's crimes. It detailed bribes to city officials to approve her real estate deals, payoffs to journalists to kill negative stories, and a complex money laundering scheme that involved a network of high-profile individuals. It was the story that Liam had been chasing, the story that had unknowingly put the woman he loved in mortal danger. Isabella had been his anonymous source. Corbin now had a clear motive. Isabella knew too much. She was not just a threat to Serafina's reputation. She was a threat to her entire criminal enterprise. The pregnancy was the catalyst, the final act of defiance that had sealed her fate. But a motive was not enough. He needed evidence that placed Serafina at the scene of the crime. Her alibi was ironclad. She had been hosting a dinner party at her lavish estate, attended by a dozen of the city's most influential people. They all confirmed that she had been a charming and attentive hostess, never leaving their sight for more than a few minutes. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A junior detective, canvassing the area around Isabella's apartment building, found a nervous doorman who, after some prodding, admitted that he had been paid a large sum of money to forget about a back service entrance that was not covered by security cameras. He also remembered seeing a car, a dark, expensive sedan, parked in the alleyway behind the building on the night of the murder. He had thought nothing of it at the time, but now his conscience was getting the better of him. At the same time, Liam, sifting through Isabella's old emails, found a series of threatening messages sent from an anonymous account. The language was cold, precise, and filled with a chilling intimacy. The sender knew details about Isabella's life that only someone very close to her could know. He also found a series of emails between Isabella and Chloe, Serafina's personal assistant. In the last few weeks of her life, Isabella had been trying to help Chloe, who was desperate to leave her job but was bound by a draconian non-disclosure agreement. Corbin brought Chloe in for questioning. The young woman was a wreck, terrified and racked with guilt. She confessed that Serafina had found out about her correspondence with Isabella and had threatened to ruin her life. She admitted that on the night of the murder, Serafina had ordered her to go to Isabella's apartment and leave the back service door unlocked. She had been too scared to refuse. She had been the one who knocked on the door, the unwitting lure that had led Isabella to her death. The net was tightening. The tangled web of lies and deceit that Serafina had so carefully woven was beginning to unravel. Corbin had the motive, he had the means, and now he had a witness who could place her at the scene. The image of the flawless, untouchable chairwoman was about to be shattered, and the cruel truth of her crimes was about to be exposed to the world. He now had everything he needed to face the puppet master in her lair. The confrontation took place in Serafina Dubois's office, the same room from which she had orchestrated her empire and controlled Isabella's life. It was a space designed to intimidate, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city she believed she owned, and walls adorned with modern art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Serafina sat behind a large, imposing desk of polished mahogany, the picture of calm and collected power. She had agreed to the meeting with a condescending air of amusement, as if this were a minor inconvenience, a trivial matter to be dispensed with before her next board meeting. "Detective Corbin," she said, her voice a silken purr that did little to hide the steel beneath. "To what do I owe this unpleasantness?" Corbin did not sit. He stood in the center of the room, a rumpled, unassuming figure who seemed utterly unimpressed by the opulence that surrounded him. He met her icy gaze with a steady, unwavering stare. "I'm here to talk about the murder of Isabella Reyes," he began, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Serafina feigned a look of sorrow, a practiced expression she had perfected for the television cameras. "A terrible tragedy, a great loss to the organization and to me personally. Isabella was like a daughter to me." "That's where you're wrong," Corbin said, his voice dropping an octave. "She wasn't like a daughter to you. She was your daughter." The words hung in the air, more shocking than any accusation of financial crime. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable surprise, fear, crossed Serafina's face before her mask of composure snapped back into place. Corbin pressed on, laying out the evidence with the methodical precision of a surgeon. He spoke of a birth certificate he had uncovered in a dusty archive, a document that listed a young, unknown Serafina Dubois as the mother of a baby girl given up for adoption 24 years ago. He spoke of how Serafina had tracked her daughter down, how she had manipulated her into entering the pageant world, not out of love, but out of a twisted desire to mold her into the perfect, unblemished version of herself that she had never been. He then moved on to the financial crimes, presenting her with copies of the ledger pages that Isabella had so bravely secured. He detailed the money laundering, the blackmail, the bribes, a litany of crimes that she had committed to build and protect her empire. Serafina listened, her expression unmoving, her hands folded calmly on the desk. These are baseless accusations, detective. Fantasies. You have no proof. Oh, but I do, Corbin said. He played a recording of Chloe's confession, her tearful voice filling the silent room, detailing how Serafina had forced her to unlock the service door to Isabella's apartment. He presented the doorman's statement, and the security footage from a nearby building that had captured a glimpse of Serafina's car in the alleyway. The timestamp corroborating her brief absence from her dinner party, a brief absence that she had explained away as a headache. Finally, he spoke of the murder itself. The forensics team had found a single, silver hair clutched in Isabella's hand, a hair that was a perfect DNA match for Serafina. He painted a chilling picture of the final moments of Isabella's life, of Serafina, her face contorted with rage, confronting the daughter who had dared to defy her, the daughter who was about to expose her secrets and shatter her perfect world. He spoke of a struggle, of Isabella fighting for her life and the life of her unborn child. It was the mention of the child, the grandchild she would never know, that finally broke through Serafina's iron control. Her carefully constructed facade shattered, and the monster beneath was revealed. Her face, no longer serene and powerful, twisted into a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. She was a fool. Serafina spat, her voice no longer a cultured purr but a venomous hiss. I gave her everything. I took her from nothing and made her a queen. And how did she repay me? By consorting with that gutter rat journalist. By getting herself pregnant, like some common tramp. She was going to ruin everything I had built. She was going to ruin me. In that moment, in that chilling, unhinged monologue, she confessed to everything. She spoke not of a mother's love, but of a creator's rage at a flawed creation. She saw Isabella not as her daughter, but as an extension of herself, a vessel for her own thwarted ambitions. The pregnancy was the ultimate betrayal, a stain on her legacy. She admitted to the murder with a terrifying lack of remorse, her only regret being that she had been caught. As uniformed officers entered the room to place her under arrest, Serafina showed no emotion. She stood, smoothed down her suit, and walked towards them with the same arrogant pride she had carried her entire life. Her reign was over, but she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The arrest of Serafina Dubois sent shockwaves through the city and the world. The story was a media sensation, the sordid details of her crimes laid bare for all to see. The Miss Global charity organization, built on a foundation of lies and corruption, crumbled into dust. Liam, though still consumed by a grief that would never truly fade, found a new purpose. He published his story, a searing exposé of the corruption that had led to Isabella's death. He made sure the world knew the truth, not just about Serafina's crimes, but about the woman Isabella truly was, brave, loving, and on the cusp of a life that had been so cruelly stolen from her. He established a foundation in her name, a charity that would help young women escape from abusive and exploitative situations, a true legacy of hope and compassion. The final scene of this tragic story took place months later, in a small, quiet park. Liam sat on a bench, the same bench where he and Isabella had shared so many secret moments. He held the grainy sonogram picture in his hand, a bittersweet reminder of the future they had planned. The pain was still there, a hollow ache in his chest, but it was now mingled with a sense of peace. Justice had been served. Serafina Dubois would spend the rest of her life in a cold, concrete cell, a cage far more real than the one she had built for her daughter. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grass, Liam looked at the photograph of a smiling Isabella that he always carried with him. Her light had been extinguished, but her memory, and the truth of her story, would live on. He vowed to honor that memory, to continue to fight for the truth, and to create a better world, a world that his child would have been proud to be born into. The fairy tale had ended in a nightmare, but in its aftermath, a new, more honest story could begin. A story of justice, remembrance, and a love that not even death could truly destroy.